Imagine it's like the 1970s, right?
Yeah.
And you were going out to buy a brand new car. You wouldn't just look at the make and the model.
Oh, definitely not.
Right. If you were really in the know, like a true insider, you'd actually check the manufacturing date
Hmm.
because you had to pray it wasn't built on a Friday.
Yeah, it's one of those great open secrets of historic auto manufacturing. I mean,
Yeah.
Tuesday through Thursday, you got a solid, reliable machine. But Friday, you got a lemon.
An absolute lemon. And, the reason why is just fascinating. It wasn't about the parts at all. It was about the people. Because Friday had the highest labor absenteeism.
Right.
The really highly skilled workers, they started their weekends early, so management just had to scramble. They pulled in these temporary, way less skilled workers just to keep the assembly line moving.
And the quality just absolutely plummeted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Welcome to your custom deep dive. Today, we are taking this giant stack of research, historical case studies, and some pretty dense financial frameworks, and we're unpacking a massive 75-year-old business secret.
Yeah, we're really looking at how corporate giants actually measure success behind closed doors.
Right, and we're going to give you a shortcut to being highly financially informed.
Yeah.
Because that whole Friday car phenomenon, it perfectly illustrates the complex reality of managing a business. Okay, let's unpack this. Usually when we look at a company from the outside, we tend to judge it by like one single metric, which is profit. Does it make money?
Exactly. We just look at the bottom line. We see a massive revenue number or this huge net income, and we just assume, well, that's a winning business.
Right, they're killing it.
But it's really an incomplete picture because the real secret to evaluating success isn't just the sheer volume of profit. It's about how efficiently a company uses the things it already has to actually generate that profit.
Which brings us to a very specific way of looking at a company, breaking it down into what are called strategic business units, or SBUs.
Right. So an SBU is essentially a profit center within a much larger corporation. And what's crucial to understand here is that an SBU isn't necessarily a standalone legal entity. Like, it doesn't issue stock and it doesn't deal with, shareholder liabilities. The corporate parent handles all that high-level financial engineering.
They do the heavy lifting.
Exactly. For an SBU to exist, it really just needs its own dedicated balance sheet and a clear mandate from the corporate level saying, hey, we are assigning you these specific assets. Your job is to use them to maximize profit.
So if I'm managing one of these units, I'm basically given a sandbox. I don't care about the corporate mortgage or the overarching stock price. My entire universe is just my sandbox and the tools inside it.
Precisely. You are evaluated purely on how effectively you utilize those exact tools. And to measure that, we look at an analytical model that has truly stood the test of time, which is the DuPont formula. What's fascinating here is that the roots of this formula go back over 7 decades.
Wow.
Yeah, straight from the archives of the DuPont Chemical Company.
Which is just wild to think about. I mean, business has evolved from, like, literal typewriters to artificial intelligence in that time.
But the durability of this framework remains completely unchallenged. Technology evolves and markets shift, but the fundamental underlying truths of business efficiency, they just do not change. The math of efficiency is timeless.
Okay, let's try to visualize this to make it really practical for you listening. Think of an SBU like a food truck. Let's say the corporate parent owns a massive fleet of food trucks across the whole city. Corporate owns the physical truck, they bought the ovens, and they provide the starting cash in the register every morning.
Right. Those are your assigned assets.
Exactly. As the manager of that specific truck, I am not lying awake at night worrying about the company's overall debt. My only job is to squeeze as much profit out of my specific truck, my specific oven, and my specific inventory of ingredients as humanly possible.
That is a perfect analogy. The food truck manager is evaluated on how effectively they utilize those exact assets. And the DuPont formula is the tool used to score them. So let's look at the raw formula itself.
Let's do it.
It calculates return on assets, or ROA. The formula is after-tax cash flow divided by revenue. And then you multiply that result by a second ratio, which is revenue divided by assets.
Wait, let me look at that math for a second.
Okay.
If I multiply a fraction that has revenue in the denominator by a fraction that has revenue in the numerator, they just cancel each other out.
They do. When you strip away the revenue components, the simplified golden rule at the end of the day is literally just after-tax cash flow divided by total assets.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. How much cash did you actually generate compared to the total value of the resources you used to generate it?
It's incredibly clean when you reduce it down like that. But obviously, running a massive corporation isn't just a single math problem.
No, definitely not.
To really understand how a business operates, we have to look under the hood at those specific assets. Because it's not just like a giant pile of gold sitting in a vault. The framework breaks the machinery down into 4 main categories, right?
Hmm?
Cash, accounts receivable, inventory, and fixed assets.
Right. And let's start with cash, because the way large companies handle this is often pretty counterintuitive. You might think our food truck operator has total control over their cash reserves.
Yeah, I'd assume they have a safe in the back or something.
Right. But in many larger companies, these profit centers don't actually manage their own cash balances.
So corporate is acting like a strict parent holding onto the allowance.
Exactly. The corporate parent holds the cash centrally. By pooling it all together, they can invest it on a massive scale to get a maximum return. They just dole it out to the business units as needed.
Oh, that makes sense.
So the unit's working cash balance depends entirely on how well its manager can predict and communicate their daily cash inflows and outflows to corporate.
Got it. And then you have accounts receivable. Basically, the money your customers owe you. I imagine this changes drastically depending on how strict you are, right?
Yeah.
Like if I run my food truck and let people run a tab, my accounts receivable goes way up.
Yeah.
But if I demand cash up front, it's zero.
Right, and it's heavily influenced by the competitive environment, too. Sometimes you have to offer lenient credit terms, like, giving a client 90 days to pay just to win their business over a competitor.
But doing so ties up your assets.
Exactly. It balloons your denominator in the formula.
Okay, so that covers cash and accounts receivable. But what about the physical stuff? I'm talking about inventory and fixed assets. How do different business models change what a company physically has to hold on to?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, vertical integration is a fantastic way to understand this. Vertical integration basically refers to how much of the overall production process a company does itself, rather than buying from suppliers.
Okay.
Think of a fully vertically integrated oil company. They are out there drilling for the petroleum, they own and operate the pipelines, they run the massive refineries, they store the finished product in huge tanks, and they own the retail gas stations.
Wow. That is a staggering amount of fixed assets. I mean, you own the literal pipes in the ground and the giant refineries, not to mention the inventory just sitting in those pipes and tanks for months.
Right. Now, contrast that with a company that merely owns a chain of retail gas stations. They purchase the gasoline from outside sources, maybe even from that vertically integrated competitor.
Oh.
The retail-only company has significantly less investment in fixed assets and inventory.
So their denominator in the formula, their total assets, is incredibly small. Now, looking at the research here, there's a fascinating operational detail regarding fixed assets and manufacturing shifts.
Oh, yeah.
It asks this really simple question. Why would a company choose to run a massive one-shift operation, which requires a huge building and a ton of equipment to hit a daily quota, when they could just run 3 shifts around the clock with a third of the equipment?
It's a critical question of asset utilization. A 3-shift operation is highly efficient for machine-driven, mass production environments. Think about chemical plants, steel mills, or paper companies.
Right.
In fact, for some of these, it's prohibitively expensive to ever stop the machines. You can't just shut down a steel furnace at 5 p.m. and economically restart it the next morning.
That would be a disaster.
Yeah, and if a chemical plant shuts down, it could take weeks just to clean out the kettles before they can be safely restarted.
Weeks just to scrub the kettles.
Yeah.
That explains why they keep them running 24/7.
But going back to our Friday car example from the intro, you can't always run 3 shifts successfully because the machines might not need to sleep, but the people do.
Exactly. Running 3 shifts only works if the quality of your labor is consistent. If you are manufacturing custom-designed products that require, intense, highly skilled management, you simply might not have enough quality workers or supervisors to cover a night shift.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you force a 24-hour cycle there, the quality drops, just like those 1970s cars. So managing assets is this incredibly complex juggling act. Which brings us back to why the DuPont formula is so valuable. Because it doesn't just give you a single good or bad score. It breaks that return on assets down into 2 competing components. We briefly touched on them earlier before we canceled out revenue.
Right.
Let's look at them individually. The formula multiplies your margin by your asset turnover.
Yes. Margin and asset turnover. Margin is your efficiency. After-tax cash flow divided by revenue. Basically, for every dollar you make in sales, how many pennies of pure profit do you actually get to keep in your pocket?
And asset turnover is your volume, revenue divided by assets. So how many dollars of sales can you generate for every single dollar of assets you have tied up in the business?
Correct. And here is the core tension of corporate strategy. These two components, margin and turnover, they naturally want to pull in opposite directions. It is the ultimate corporate tug of war.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's use our food truck analogy to visualize this tug of war. Let's say I run a gourmet lobster roll truck. I sell these things for 30 bucks a pop, and the ingredients only cost me 10. I am keeping a massive chunk of profit on every single sale. My margin is incredible.
But your asset turnover is likely terrible. You need expensive refrigeration equipment to keep the lobster fresh, which drives up your fixed assets. And because it's a luxury item, you might only sell 20 rolls a day. So you have high margin, but very low turnover.
Right. Now, suppose across the street someone is running a dirty water hot dog cart. They sell a hot dog for $2. Their profit on each dog is mere pennies. Their margin is practically non-existent.
However, their asset turnover is sky high. The cart itself costs almost nothing. The inventory is cheap and doesn't require complex storage. And they are selling 500 hot dogs a day to a massive line of people. Low margin, incredibly high turnover.
And when you apply the DuPont formula and multiply the margin by the turnover, the guy selling cheap hot dogs might actually have a much higher return on assets than my fancy lobster truck.
Oh, absolutely.
He is using his minimal assets way more efficiently than I am.
Exactly. And this dynamic plays out in massive corporations all the time. Let's say you are a manufacturing executive and you decide to outsource your production to a third party. What happens?
Well, if I outsource, I can sell off my factories. My fixed assets plummet. So my asset turnover improves dramatically because my denominator shrank. I'm making the same revenue, but with way fewer assets. But wait, if I'm paying a vendor to make the product for me, they are taking a cut.
Precisely. You have to pay the vendor a premium. The profit you used to keep entirely in-house is now shared. So your asset turnover went up, but your margin dropped.
It's a total trade-off. What if I go the other way? What if I vertically integrate and build my own factories?
Then you keep all the profit at every step. Your margin improves beautifully, but your asset turnover gets destroyed because now you are sitting on millions of dollars of heavy machinery and extra inventory.
And what about that 24/7 continuous operation we talked about earlier? Running machines constantly reduces the amount of equipment you need, which pushes asset turnover up.
Yeah.
Your margins might even improve additionally because you avoid the inefficiencies of starting up and shutting down. But if I'm running my factory around the clock, I'm making products faster than I ever have. Doesn't that just create a massive storage problem if the sales team isn't selling them fast enough?
That is the dangerous trap. If your sales pace doesn't match your continuous production output, your finished goods inventory starts building up dangerously fast. Eventually, you have millions of dollars of product just sitting in warehouses, collecting dust, and incurring storage fees.
So my assets are ballooning.
Yes. And to fix it, you are forced into price cutting just to get the product out the door and enter the warehouse.
And slashing prices immediately destroys my margin. It's fascinating. You push one lever and the other one pulls back. It's impossible to cheat the system. So how does this actually look in the real world when companies keep score?
Well, the research has a great breakdown of this.
Yeah, our sources break down an incredible scenario that ditches the raw spreadsheets and looks at the daily reality of different divisions. Like Exhibit 7.1 talks about 3 companies, right? Wilson, Flanagan, and Joseph.
Right.
Flanagan's is giant with $50 million in revenue. Wilson has the highest profit margin. But Joseph, this tiny little $10 million company, actually has the highest return on assets at 10%. Because its asset turnover is a massive 2.0x.
Exactly. And you can see this even more clearly when you look at sales territories as their own SBUs. Imagine a single manufacturing factory treating its regional sales teams as distinct profit centers. You have 3 territories: North, Central, and West. The factory sells the product internally to these territories at a predetermined market price of, let's say, $1 per unit.
Okay, so the regional managers are buying it internally for $1. And then their job is to go out into the real world and sell it for a profit. And they control their own destiny. They set the final selling price, they negotiate the credit terms with clients, and they manage their own local warehouses.
Exactly. Now let's look at the traditional metrics first. The North Territory brings in the highest revenue. They are the sales kings. The Central Territory has the highest gross profit margin. They are selling the product at a premium price, keeping 33% of the revenue as profit.
But then there's the West Territory. By traditional metrics, West looks like a total disaster. They have the lowest total revenue, and their profit margin is dead last at just 25%. They are clearly discounting the product heavily just to get it out the door. If you just looked at the income statement, you'd probably want to fire the manager of the West Territory.
But the DuPont formula forces us to look at the balance sheet, the assets. The North Territory manager, with their high revenue, is sitting on a massive amount of accounts receivable and a warehouse stuffed full of inventory to guarantee fast delivery to high-paying clients. Their invested capital is huge.
Right. North is acting like the gourmet lobster truck. But what is the daily reality for the West manager? Their total assets are exceptionally low, their warehouse is almost empty, and their accounts receivable are tiny.
Because the West manager is playing a completely different game, they are likely selling in massive bulk quantities. High volume allows them to offer lower pricing to customers, which explains the terrible margin. But that same high volume means inventory doesn't sit around collecting dust, it comes in and immediately ships out.
And because their accounts receivable is so low, it means the West manager is really strict. They aren't letting clients run a 90-day tab. They're saying, look, I'm giving you a massive discount, but you pay me in 15 days.
Exactly. Their asset turnover ratio is massive. They are turning their limited assets almost 3 times faster than the other territories. So when you run the DuPont formula, West, the territory with the lowest revenue and the worst profit margin, has a staggering return on assets of nearly 32%. They absolutely blow the North and Central territories out of the water in terms of efficiency.
Okay, wait. Let me push back here for a second because this feels like a trap. If West has this massively high ROA, are they objectively the best performing territory? Should the corporate CEO look at this and say, all right, North and Central, you're doing it wrong. Copy whatever West is doing immediately?
This raises a critical point, and it's something any good financial analyst will warn you against. The formula is a measurement tool. It does not make decisions. West having the highest return on assets does not automatically mean they are better.
But the math is right there. They're the most efficient. Why wouldn't I want all my teams to be that efficient?
Because numbers without context are dangerous. Corporate management has to look at the broader landscape of the actual market. What is the competitive environment in each region? For instance, what if the North Territory is battling in a fiercely competitive marketplace? They might have to hold massive amounts of inventory to guarantee overnight delivery, just to keep their clients from jumping to a rival.
Ah, I see. They're forced into a high asset strategy just to survive.
Precisely. Or perhaps North has to offer extended 90-day credit terms because all their competitors are doing it. Meanwhile, maybe the West Territory operates in a region where they essentially have a monopoly. When you have no competition, it's easy to demand strict 15-day credit terms and force clients to buy in bulk.
Or maybe the Central Territory is intentionally taking a hit on their assets because they are trying a brand new marketing strategy to break into a new demographic, offering easy credit to win over hesitant buyers. You can't just blindly chase the highest efficiency number without understanding why the numbers look the way they do on the ground.
Exactly. The formula provides clear measurement and accountability. It highlights exactly what levers the managers are pulling. But senior leadership must make judgments based on the context of the real world. You manage the business, you don't just manage the equation.
So what does this all mean for you as you're listening to this? I think the big takeaway is that true business literacy goes way beyond just looking at a company's bottom line profit or celebrating a massive revenue quarter. It's about asking how efficiently they use the cash, the equipment, and the inventory they have to generate that profit. It's about looking at that constant tug of war between high margins and high volume. The lobster truck versus the hot dog cart.
And understanding that every single decision a business makes, whether it's running a factory for a night shift, outsourcing a department, or just giving a client an extra 30 days to pay an invoice, echoes through that balance sheet. Every choice either builds up an asset or drains one, completely changing the fundamental efficiency of the company.
But before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought that we uncovered at the very end of our research. Everything we've talked about today, from the food trucks to the steel mills to the sales warehouses, relies on measuring physical, tangible accounting assets, things you can touch, sell, or lock in a vault. But there is a modern concept that completely challenges this: a business with no assets.
It's a fascinating shift in perspective, especially in today's economy. Think about a massive CPA firm, a global management consulting agency, or a company doing high-level pharmaceutical research.
Right. If you look at their traditional balance sheet, their only true accounting assets might be a bunch of laptops, some ergonomic office chairs, and maybe a really nice espresso machine in the break room,
Exactly. Their traditional physical asset base is almost zero.
which totally breaks the math we just learned. If your denominator, your total assets is close to zero, your return on assets looks infinitely high. It becomes a completely useless number. It forces you to ask a really difficult question. How do you measure the true return on assets when a company's most valuable resources aren't on a balance sheet at all?
It is the ultimate modern business riddle. In a knowledge economy, the real assets are the human brains, the specialized expertise, and the deep client relationships. How do you financially value an asset that literally puts on its coat and walks out the door every day at 5 p.m.?
And more importantly, how do you prevent your best assets from going to work for your competitor the next morning? It completely changes what it means to manage resources. Next time you're looking at a wildly successful tech or consulting firm, ask yourself how you'd measure their efficiency when their biggest assets wear shoes. Thank you so much for joining us on this custom deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning the numbers, and try looking at the businesses around you through this 75-year-old analytical lens. You might be surprised by what you see.